Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Benchwarmers Sports Talk Podcast. And we're finally back after a little bit of a break. Things just got a little hectic there for a little while, but we're back and we're excited to be back. And there's a lot to talk about around the whole world of sports, and we're excited to be back and talking about it. As always, I'm Labi, and I'm joined by Jacob. Jacob, nice to talk to you again after a little while.
Man, school was ridiculous for like a week and a half, 2 weeks, and I'm not the only one who's had a lot going on, Lab. You're not like in Toronto anymore, right?
No, so yeah, the part of the reason for the delay, busy with just life and school, and also moved to a different city. Was without Wi-Fi for a few days, so that was fun to live like the old times. But now we're back, connected to the internet, and ready to record across two different cities this time. And of course, nothing's going to be able to change with that. And let's just get right into it. And, obviously a lot of sports related stuff to talk about. But the first thing I do want to mention, which is something that we haven't talked a lot about on the podcast, or haven't talked in a while, because, it's kind of something that not a lot of people follow, and, maybe goes to the back of our minds for a lot of people. I know we talked about it at the beginning of the season. I've certainly been following it, and the season just finished, which is why we get to talk about it, because wow, what a way the season finished. And of course, I'm talking about the Formula One season, for those of you who don't know. And well, Jacob, you're not the biggest Formula One fan. I'm the one who kind of watches more races, but even you were aware of kind of what was going on at the end here, just because it was such a crazy finish.
I mean, you had one guy who's never won it before on this stage, and you have the other guy who has a chance to make it 8, and no one's ever done that before. So these were two incredible race drivers, and there was kind of some controversy if you want to take us through what happened during this race.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you set the scene perfectly. So basically, the Formula One season, it's a 22 race season. Whoever has the most points at the end of the season wins the championship. And, most of the time, someone will be way ahead, and it will all be wrapped up with a few races to spare. Kind of like how a team would clinch first place without having it to go down to the final day. However, this year was not the case, as we had Lewis Hamilton, as of course Jacob mentioned. It's probably a name that everyone's recognized, and that's because he is one of the most successful drivers of all times. Jacob mentioned he's trying to win his 8th world championship. That would be the most ever. Him and Schumacher are both tied with 7. And he was going up against Max Verstappen, a young, new kind of phenom. It's kind of crazy to say phenom because he's been around for such a long time, but he, really broke into the sport as a teenager. So he's still only 24 years old. And this was his first real challenge season. And the two of them were really going back and forth all season long. At one point, Verstappen was leading by about 25 to 30 points. Hamilton, like the pro that he is, able to close the gap. They go into the last race dead even on points, which basically sets up a winner-take-all race for the last race of the season. And yeah, like you mentioned, there was a little bit of controversy. First off, like turn 1, lap 1, Hamilton passes Verstappen. Verstappen tries to get him back. Hamilton has to go off the track in order to stay in front, which normally is seen as a penalty. So the rule is, if you go off of the track and you gain an unfair advantage, you're supposed to give it back and be penalized for it. And Hamilton didn't give the position back, so he stayed in first place. But according to the race directors, he slowed down enough to kind of close the gap between the two, where it was seen as something that was okay. I really don't know. I think that was very 50-50 though, so I think most people were like, I can see kind of why nothing else was done, but that was just the beginning. The really crazy thing is right at the end, Hamilton comfortably in front by about 10, maybe not 10 seconds, but I think he was about 6 or 7 seconds ahead. It was looking like he was going to wrap up another world championship, and then another driver crashes, and there's a safety car. And when there's a safety car, all the cars get to bunch up and they drive really slowly for safety, so that the stewards can clear the racetrack. And as this is going on, there's normally a couple of different ways that this can happen. And sometimes what will happen in a safety car is the cars that have been lapped during the race get a chance to unlap themselves. But this can take a little bit of time, and this crash and safety car happened with only 4 or 5 laps left in the race. And so from a race director's perspective, I understand wanting to get the race underway as fast as possible, because the last thing you want when, so many people are watching, it's literally the championship decider. You don't want to end a race under a safety car. You want them to finish racing. But the way in which they were able to do that was very unorthodox. So there were 5 lapped cars between Verstappen in second and Hamilton in first, and only those 5 lapped cars were allowed to unlap themselves so that they could speed up the process. And so traditionally the rule is all lapped cars have to be unlapped or none. It's not a pick and choose situation. And then also, normally if cars are given the chance to unlap themselves during a safety car, there's a 1 lap delay between the unlapping and when the race can resume again, and the unlapping and the race resuming happen on the same lap, which is also something that's never been done before and is against the rules kind of. And this naturally played into Verstappen's favor because he was on better tires. He was able to pass Hamilton on the last lap. Max Verstappen is the world champion. And I think Verstappen's a worthy champion. I think Hamilton would have been a worthy champion if he won. And I think Verstappen's very deserving of the title. I just think it's very unfortunate that there's now this controversy that's going to be surrounding what was otherwise a phenomenal season and a really exciting championship win for Max Verstappen.
It's really hard to argue with that, but you're right, some controversy, man, and everyone loves a good controversial story, but I don't know about this one. I do think that Hamilton should have had the opportunity to win this. I think that with everything taken into account, obviously he had that early controversial moment when he, like you said, he was too far and then he had to slow down and they deemed that okay. And this was a race that, as entertaining as it was full of moments. And I think these moments really made the race that much more fun. I think taking into account F1 is becoming a huge popularity sport here in North America, and a lot of people see it as not a sport. It's just a bunch of cars racing, going in laps around and around. But the amount of intensity and training that these guys have to go through in order to have the success they do, it's ridiculous. And I think that people need to start putting some respect on F1 and having the same respect that they have for their sport. And I think that F1 is just going to get bigger and bigger, and it really helps having 2 of the best. It's like Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin in the finals. It would never happen, but it's 2 of the best, and it's just fun. It's fun to watch, and it's really a winner take all situation. It's this game and this race, and that's it.
Yeah, no, I think you make a lot of good points there, and I think, obviously the sport is really growing a lot, particularly in North America. And I think a lot of the reason for that success was the Netflix show Drive to Survive. I know a lot of people who have watched it and have slowly tried to get more into the sport since watching it. And what the Netflix show does a really good job of is creating extra intensity that's not really there. If you watch the season, if you follow the season and then watch the Netflix show, they're not making stuff up, but they're stretching the truth a little bit to make it more dramatic than it really was. But you kind of need that drama in order to attract the fans, the new fans at least. So it's trying to find that balance. And I think this is the problem. And I think you mentioned it. It's people should be getting into this sport because this year was a great season of watching 2 really tremendous drivers at the top of their game battling it out. That's the drama. And I think that, unfortunately, this decision that happened at this race was the race director saying we need to do everything we can, whether it's against the rules or not, to get them racing on the last lap because that's going to provide the most entertainment. And I think, obviously, these sports leagues are businesses, and they're trying to make money, and they're trying to grow viewership, and that's a very important aspect of the sports of sports and of each sports league. But to the point where you are going to jeopardize the credibility of your sport for more viewers, I think that might be crossing a line, and I think a lot of people had a problem with the decision making, particularly in this race, for that reason. They want the race to keep its integrity. They don't want to lose the integrity of the sport just so that you can get a few extra thousand fans, or a few more people, or like a more exciting Netflix show.
Ultimately, it's a business. And the reason why they did this was because it's a business. You make more money, you get more people to watch, everyone is happy. But you're right, the integrity of the sport was kind of tarnished, I would say, in a sense, where they went against the rules that have been put there for a reason, and they just wanted, they did it because of a business side. And I think that what they did here was probably not the right decision because of the controversy that followed, but it was the decision they made, and it's they reap their repercussions and they reap their consequences. So what happened, and if, whether or not you're happy that Verstappen won, he won, and there's nothing really anyone can do about it. I know Lewis Hamilton has appealed for the race to be looked at, that final lap more in specific, but I don't think it's going to change what happened. I think Verstappen was the better racer that race.
Yeah, the Mercedes team made two official formal appeals. From what I know, I believe one of them has been thrown out, and I think the other one, I know for a fact one of them's been thrown out. I think the other one's also been thrown out. Let's be real here. Even if their appeal has merit, nothing's going to happen. Like you said, the championship has been decided. And the thing is it sucks that there's always going to be that cloud, because I think if you take all the other bullshit away, it's one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting Formula One season. And I know we can be critical of the decision making behind the scenes, but for anyone who's listening, I really do encourage you to follow Formula One. And next season, which starts in March, so it's not a very quick turnaround to the next season, there are huge rule changes to the regulations, which basically means that the cars are going to be completely different, like new engines, new chassis design, everything. So for those of you who are like, why would I watch this sport? Because some of the cars are just way better than others. Well, not next year, because every single team has to dramatically redesign their cars. The last time this happened was back in 2013, and there was a complete retool of which teams were good and which teams were bad. And so next year, because of this, I imagine there's going to be some dramatic changes in terms of which teams are good, which teams are bad, and so it's going to be a lot more interesting, because next year there's going to be a lot of uncertainty, maybe even more uncertainty, coming off of a season where this was the most uncertain I think it's ever been. Because if you look at the recent history of Formula One, Mercedes. Now, Max Verstappen for Red Bull won the Drivers' Championship, but Mercedes as a team won the Constructors' Championship for the 8th consecutive season, and Lewis Hamilton has won 6 of the last 8. His teammate at Mercedes has won 1, and now Max Verstappen has finally won 1. So this era of F1, 16 championships were awarded. 15 of the 16 awards were won by Mercedes as a team or a Mercedes driver. The exception was Verstappen this season. And so Mercedes has shown that they can be beaten, and we're going into a regulation change next year where we don't know if Mercedes are going to be the same dominant force that they've used to be. So if you are a new fan of Formula One, now's the perfect time to get into it, because there's going to be more uncertainty, and it's going to be so exciting going into a season in March, knowing that not knowing that Mercedes are just going to walk to victory. Part of the reason why I was cheering for Max Verstappen at the early parts of the season is not because I necessarily wanted him to win the championship. As a matter of fact, I was pretty neutral towards either driver. I thought, both Hamilton and Max probably deserved it based on their driving this season. But I was cheering for Max early in the season because I wanted to see a competitive championship. Because Hamilton has been so dominant that he's been wrapping up the title with 3, 4, 5 races to spare, and it wasn't close. But this year, completely different. Max was able to take Lewis all the way up to literally the last lap and win the championship, and I think it's going to be just as entertaining next year. So I highly recommend, if anyone has been trying to maybe get into it, watch the Netflix show, maybe watch some race highlights on YouTube this year, and if it seems like something that you might want to give a chance, the season starts again in mid-March, which is only a couple months away, and when we hit March, I will definitely be doing a preseason kind of hype video, predictions video, just breaking down the upcoming season. So look forward to that in a couple months' time.
I think you summed it up pretty well there, Lavi. It's going to be a whole new clean slate. Drivers get a new fresh chance. It's anybody's game. It's anyone's game.
Absolutely. For those hockey fans, it's kind of like coming out of that 2005 lockout where they made so many changes to the rules, and it's going to be like that. So you kind of know what to expect, but you also don't know what to expect. So it should be a lot of fun.
Well, speaking of lockouts, Lab, what's going on in the MLB right now?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's surprised about this. Going back to your point earlier about how these sports leagues at the end of the day are businesses, the reality is I think we've now entered an era where the second a collective bargaining agreement is over, there's going to be a lockout. Not there might be. I feel like there's going to be a lockout because there's so much riding on these collective bargaining agreements now, because especially in some of these major leagues, like you're talking about billions in like sponsorships, TV revenue, like the list goes on for the owners, and you're talking about millions in terms of salaries for the pro players. One of the big talking points in baseball is how badly the young players and the prospects in the system are being treated, and so that's a huge sticking point for the players going into this labor dispute. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised at all. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if we see a shortened season this coming year in baseball.
Yeah, well, it ultimately it comes down to money. And are the players getting paid enough? Do they think they're getting paid enough? Are they worth enough? Like, it sucks because the people who are really affected by it are the players and the fans. We want to be able to see, we want to go to games and we want to see our teams do the greatest, and we want to, have fun while we're at them. $12 beer is always great. Not great. That was sarcasm. Here in Toronto, beer is ridiculously overpriced at any Jays game you go to. But it's a sad situation where I agree. I could see a shortened season. I don't know if they'll have a lockout of the complete season, but I do think the season will start locked out. I do not think that was in April they have. Is that when
April.
It starts? April?
Yeah.
They won't have training camp, and they won't be playing baseball until probably about September. That's what I see.
Damn. You see, I think best case scenario is shortened training camp, shortened spring training, and then they get the 162 game season in. But I think that's best case scenario. I think the more likely scenario is shortened training camp, no spring training, and maybe like on a 120 game season or something like that, where they start May June ish. But because like you mentioned, the people that this hurts is the fans, and I think maybe the one good thing that the fans have going for them in what might make this labor dispute shorter and might avoid as much of a lockout as they can is the whole fan dynamic, because obviously it affected Canadian teams more than American teams, but it still affected American teams. There's a long time where games were not played due to the pandemic, and then there was a long time where games were played behind closed doors. Like I said, for some teams it was a longer process than others, but even the teams that opened up the earliest still missed a while with the pandemic. MLB literally just had a shortened season in 2020 because of the pandemic. And then in 2021, certain teams were affected in terms of what their attendance figures could be. Obviously, worst case scenario being the Toronto Blue Jays didn't play games in Toronto until like the last 3 weeks of the season. And so that might help, because if some of these fans have gone, they could go 2 out of 3 seasons without having baseball in person, because you have the 2020 COVID shortened season, and then now you might have a 2022 lockout shortened season. And I feel like baseball can't afford to have that money, that many games canceled, or that much of the season canceled for these reasons. And so I think that might help. But I think that might be the only thing that might help. I think that if COVID wasn't a thing, we might be talking about a fully locked out season. And that's not to say that that's off the table, because we truly don't know how much flexibility there's going to be between the owners and the players.
Well, right now it's at a standstill. They're like, oh, we've made progress. Oh, we've talked to people. We've done what we need to. There's nothing happening. All the profiles of the players have been taken down, which I think is the funniest shit ever. Nothing's happening. Nothing is happening. They want to say, oh, we're making progress. So if the progress is happening, then what's going on? The Jays are talking to Freddie Freeman and his agent before the lockout because they know there's going to be a lockout. I think all the players accept that there's going to be a lockout. It's just a matter of how are they going, how long is it going to take? I do not think they will be playing until the summer, until the season starts to get cooler. It's a sad reality, but I don't think that it's all about money. And if they can't agree with money, then they're not going to get anything done. So I don't know. Yeah, best case scenario, shorten training, shorten preseason, and full 162. But I don't know, man. I can see there being a lockout for a couple of months, especially, I can obviously that would be the worst case scenario because I think that money costs more being off the field than it does on the field. So it's a matter of can they figure it out in time? And I don't know if they can.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I mean, I think the other bad thing that you have to consider is, if you look at recent history, I mean, look at the last major times the collective bargaining agreement has come up. We had an NBA lockout and an NHL lockout in the last decade due to labor disputes. I can't remember I think the NHL lockout was 2012, 2013, and then I think the NBA was either the year before or the year after that. And we had both shortened seasons in both of those sports because of it. And so, I mean, there's your evidence right there of just what happens when these CBAs expire and they have to be renegotiated. And I wouldn't be surprised if baseball follows a similar pattern where it gets done, but it gets done well into the start of the season. But with that, and once again, all the baseball fans, I mean, it is only December. So as much as we don't have a lot of confidence, there is still time. But obviously, we'll have to wait and see in the coming months if anything develops. Because like you mentioned, they talk about all this progress, but what their progress is 15-minute long meeting. You're not going to get anything done in a 15-minute long meeting. But let's switch to some sports that are actually being played. And we'll go into the world of hockey, and I guess I'll throw it over to you, Jacob. What's been catching your eye in the NHL over the last week or so?
Well, the fact that the Maple Leafs are in one of the teams that are looking to get Evander Kane, yeah, I'm not too sure about that one, but there hasn't really been a significant amount that's caught my eye. I know that Peter Mrazek played his first game back for the Leafs. The Anaheim Ducks are playing absolutely unreal hockey right now. The Oilers are slipping. The Tampa Bay Lightning are back at basically the way they used to be. I don't know if anything's caught your eye. I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the one thing that's caught my eye that was in the news recently was, did you see? Speaking of the Anaheim Ducks, did you see the goal that was scored?
Pass.
The Zegras pass, and I can't remember the guy who scored the actual goal.
Sonny Milano.
Sonny Milano. There you go. So Zegras with the Michigan pass to Sonny Milano, who bats it out of midair, straight out of the NHL 2006 trailer. If you know, you know. Legendary video game. But no, my big thing with that was the fact that, did you hear what John Tortorella said about it?
Tortorella is an old school hockey coach who's a reason why he doesn't coach anymore is because he was a very poor coach. And unfortunately, he doesn't understand that, changing the game is exactly what's been happening for the past decade. Kids are going to look at this goal. Everyone's going to look at this goal and be like, this is one of the coolest goals I think I've ever seen. Kids are obviously going to try it. What happened when Sveshnikov hit the Michigan? Every kid I know that plays hockey started doing that in practice. It's going to change the game. The culture is changing. It's not all big street broads bullies anymore. You have to be skilled to score in this league now, and Torts is old school and doesn't realize that. He's a coach who is never willing to trade and change, which is the reason why he's not a coach anymore. Sorry, that's my thought on what Torts said.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot there, and I mean, I think that if you ask hockey fans what their biggest problems are with the NHL right now, a lot of it has to do with that type of thing. The whole let our skilled players have the opportunity to be skilled. And we've made a heck of a lot of process going back to the 05 lockout, going back to the shortened season of 2013, speaking of lockouts. But definitely the 05 lockout for sure. They completely changed the way that hockey's meant to be played. And the whole point was to give more freedom to the players. And there's still continuous gripes about, like what's considered a penalty and why aren't star players, like why isn't McDavid getting penalty calls that
Matthews
he absolutely should be getting.
Matthews hasn't drawn a single penalty this year.
Yeah, which makes absolutely zero sense. He's a top 10 player in the league. The players are absolutely taking penalties against him. And so I think that's kind of to build off your whole point about like the old school view. That's where we need to continue to see progress, where it's like, the skill players have to have the ability to show their skill, and we're definitely seeing more and more skills in the game, and that's great. But, obviously there's still some areas that need to be continually addressed, and I think, unfortunately, Tortorella making those comments on a national platform on American television is very bad for the game, in terms of it goes completely against what I think most hockey fans want to see, which is let the skilled players have the ability to influence the game, because hockey's the complete opposite to every other sport like that. Like the NBA had to change free throw rules because the star players had too much power, where the NHL is the exact opposite, where the star players are literally treated worse than the average players, which makes absolutely no sense.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, Zegras didn't do anything illegal. There was nothing illegal with the play. There was nothing that should be controversial about that. It was a beautiful pass, and it was an even better goal. That's ultimately what it is. Whatever Torts has to say, I don't think people give a shit anymore, because the reason why he doesn't coach is because he made his players suffer. Ultimately, he doesn't understand that the game has changed, and I don't think he ever will. And I don't think that's anything against him, because I just don't think he has it in him. And I think that if he realized that, this is like that was like an all-star kind of move. Like the Kucherov was like an all-star move that was actually put in person. Like this was put in person before the all-star game. And I think that, I just think that's ridiculous that they were able to do this in a professional hockey game. There's nothing wrong with it. Stick was below the crossbar. The pass was a good pass. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. I thought it was one of the greatest goals I've ever seen in my life, performed by a rookie like that.
Yeah, the Anaheim Ducks are getting their young players firing. Troy Terry's having a monster season. Trevor Zegras is proving that, like, the skill that he showed in the World Juniors, he's able to be pulling off in the NHL. John Gibson is still John Gibson in net. And this Ducks team's figuring it out, and they're first in the division right now. Albeit, we talked about how awful this Pacific Division was going to be, where it was going to be wide open for literally anyone to go and claim it. And what we've seen is the Flames have maybe finally figured it out and look pretty good. The Oilers, I'm still not sold, but like McDavid and Draisaitl, just the two of them are going to do enough to get them into the playoffs. I'm not sold on anyone else on that team. But, obviously those two players are so good that they'll be fine. But then the Anaheim Ducks, out of nowhere, man. And it's good to see a young team. And, I mean, this is where, if you look at other teams in the league that are trying to go through this rebuild and trying to embrace youth, it shows that you can still be successful. And just because you're in a rebuild, retool mode doesn't mean that you need to accept losing games. Because if you look at the Anaheim Ducks roster, yeah, they're probably ahead of some teams like an Ottawa, but the difference in record is amazing. Like the Ducks have more than double the points of the Senators right now. And so like that shows that like the Ducks are just they're not embracing the whole just because we're young we have to be bad, or just because we're young we can't be competitive this year. We can be competitive this year and 5 years from now. And I love to see that mentality, and I love to see that they're pulling it off.
Yeah, I mean, speak of like the Senators, Dorian's words are coming back to eat him, so shouldn't have said stupid shit like, "Oh, the rebuild is done," and then perform the way they've been performing. Um, it's good to see like the Kings, even though the Kings are not the greatest, they're fun to watch. I've noticed. Same with like the Minnesota Wild. Yes, they're the best team in the Central, and Kirill Kaprizov has been ridiculously fun to watch. He's the reason why I think Minnesota is actually like relevant again, I would argue. Number 97 that wears the Minnesota sweater, he's been ridiculous this year. And I think, yeah, seeing the younger teams for once actually step up, and then seeing teams fail. Like you're a Penguins fan, so you hate the Islanders. How nice must it be seeing them sit at the bottom of the Metro?
Yeah, I'm shocked. I'm shocked. I mean, for the longest time, I think everyone was kind of playing off that excuse of they're playing only road games. When they move into their new building, they'll be fine. And then I think they started 0-5 in their new building. Um,
Yeah, they
it might
just
have
won.
even
They won their first one like last week.
there you go. So yeah, I'm really surprised at how poor the Islanders have been this year. I mean, I predicted them. I think at the beginning of the season to finish first in the division. Um, So yeah, it's surprising to me. Obviously, that's great. The way the Metro Division is stacking up, I mean, every team has ability. It was just who was going to kind of deliver. And I mean, I guess that's the uncertainty of the NHL because, well, the Islanders have not met any of the potential that everyone thought they had. The Rangers have taken that ability that everyone knew that they had within them, and they're running with it. And they're having a really good season. So the Metro is still very competitive, but yeah, man, I'm really shocked that the Islanders are that bad. Maybe it's because the system that they play. Maybe it's finally caught up to them.
Well,
And
we talk about old coaches playing old ways, and Barry Trotz's system, yeah, it's worked, but once you figure it out, it's pretty easy to get around.
exactly. Maybe we've gotten to that point now where, it's been very effective for, 4 or 5 seasons now. And maybe the teams have started to figure out how to play it. And there hasn't been that same level of adaptation that they've needed. I think the next year and a little bit for the Islanders is going to be huge because, the question is, can they recover this season? And if they can't, and I say it doesn't look likely. They're 11 points out of a playoff spot right now, and I mean, we don't have to revisit the whole. If you're not in a playoff spot, I think it's by American Thanksgiving, which is long gone now. Your odds of making the playoffs are very, very low. If you're not in the playoff spot by Christmas, by the new year, or if you're not close to a playoff spot come the new year, you're probably not making the playoffs. And so it's not end of season for the Islanders, but it's very close. They need to be pretty much perfect from here on out in order to pull that comeback off. And so the question mark then becomes, what do you do? Because the Islanders have done a really good job of getting great play from not great players. Like outside of Matt Barzal, I couldn't. They don't have a star on the team. So what kind of next steps are you going to take? Because it's looking like they're going to need more just talent now because I guess the system is finally showing some cracks.
Well, the thing is with the Islanders, you have look at that Metro Division. You have the Caps, the Pens, the Rangers, the Hurricanes. Like it's a pretty stacked division outside of like the Devils and well. So I don't know. Like they don't look like they care. Like Sorokin and Varlamov have been one of the worst goaltending tandem duos this season. So that's obviously not what they want, especially because they brought him in. Parise only scored his first goal last week as an Islander, so that's not a good thing either. They don't seem to be like on the same page as each other, and it's just affecting them negatively.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were both very critical of the Parisi signing when it happened. So maybe it's not surprising for us that he's been struggling, but yeah, it's been a very interesting season in terms of kind of who's where in the standings because the Bruins are still struggling. I mean, even the Penguins. I mean, we've recovered really well, and it was because of the injuries that we had. We're back into a wild card spot, but we're still 6 points out of the top three in the division. Which is significant. So I wouldn't say I'm worried because, I know that we're trending upwards and the reason we struggled is kind of due to injury, not due to bad performance. But, still, if you're sitting here on, in the middle of December, and I guess this shows just how deep the Eastern Conference is when you have the two wildcard teams being Pittsburgh and Boston.
Boston has taken a serious step back in their play, and I love it. You know what? Boston won't be in the top three. It'll be the two teams from Florida and then Toronto because, well, we talk about goaltending, and Tuukka Rask not being there is a huge problem. Look at Montreal, one of the worst teams in the league without Carey Price. So their cup run may have just been a fluke, to be honest with you.
Well, yeah, and I mean, Bergevin's gone, and I mean, for a variety of reasons, but which we don't have to get into because we've talked about them at length on this podcast. But yeah, I mean, to go to your goaltending point, the thing I hated about Boston Bruins fans was just how much they didn't appreciate Tuukka Rask. Like, if I think about goalies of the 2010s that were just elite for a long, long time, like Carey Price, but even then it was on a shaky Habs team, and even he had his kind of low points. I mean, Henrik Lundqvist is probably the most consistent goalie of the 2010s if I had to pick a goalie. But like Tuukka Rask was right there. Like every single season, Tuukka Rask put in solid numbers for the Boston Bruins. And every single year, whenever something went slightly wrong in Boston, everyone blamed Tuukka Rask when it wasn't his fault most of the time. And I never understood what Boston Bruins fans had against him because we've talked so much, and you as a Leafs fan, maybe not anymore because Jack Campbell's having a phenomenal year, but I mean you still have to re-sign him, so we'll see. And then me as a Penguins fan post Marc-Andre Fleury, and even Fleury, he was a very shaky goalie. He had his very, very good highs and very, very lows. People don't realize how hard it is to find consistent goaltending, and when you have a consistent goalie, just how much of a weight off your shoulders that is. And if you are a team that has a really solid goalie, you don't realize how privileged you are until you lose it. And I think the Bruins are finally realizing that. I never understood the hate that Tuukka Rask got. In my mind, he's a top 5 goalie of the last 10 years, maybe even top 3 goalie of the last 10 years. Like, he's just been consistent.
I'd put him top three. I don't think anyone's been more. I think Lundqvist has been more consistent than him, and I'm not even sure who's above that.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
maybe go Fleury, but then here the thing is, like, Fleury wasn't the starter for the he was split the crease for the 2 cup runs, right? So like I completely agree. I think Henrik Lundqvist's obviously number one, but I mean, if you look at the Bruins in the 2010s, or if you look at the Bruins with Tuukka Rask, yeah, they never got the Stanley Cup, but they made it to I think the Cup final in 2013, Cup final in 2020. A couple other conference finals, like they were there almost like every year they were competitive.
yeah. Oh, I agree. And now Boston is reaping its consequences, and it's just they're not playing well. And this is what happens when you lose a goaltender. You look at Toronto when they lost Frederick Anderson. Everyone thought, "Oh, can Jack Campbell really stay out? Can Jack Campbell actually do it?" And to everyone's surprise, he can. I wasn't surprised. This guy has talent. And then with Mrazek back from injury, I think that the Leafs have one of the better I don't think they're criminally underrated, but they're definitely underrated goaltending tandems.
No, definitely. I think the Leafs. Well, once again, though we talk about it all the time, it's like the Leafs could literally go 82-0 in the regular season, and it won't matter until you see what they deliver in the playoffs. They'll be a very comfortable playoff team. They won't have any issues making it to the playoffs. But and I mean, I guess I can ask your opinion, but based on other Leafs fans that I talk to, like the general consensus I'm getting from them is like, cool, let's see it in the playoffs, and until then I don't care.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying that. I know a lot of people from my school. They are also saying that, like, yeah, listen, you can get in the playoffs, that's great, but what happens in the playoffs? You got to get to the playoffs first, and ultimately, you got to see what your goaltending tandem is looking like. And Jack Campbell and Mrazek, well, Mrazek's been played like 3 games total. Um, I think they've looked okay, and I think yes, maybe the regular season doesn't matter as much because what hap- what happens in the playoffs, but you got to get there first, you know? You got to get there in the first place. You can't just magically happen to be in the playoffs because you're the Toronto Maple Leafs or because you're the Florida Panthers or because you're the Toronto the Tampa Bay Lightning. So, I think that what it comes down to is um a regular season's kind of like a preview. And I think Jack Campbell was not at fault for the reason why the Leafs lost those games. I will stand here and say that he was not at fault. And the Leafs defensively have significantly changed their game this year. So I think that what will happen is the Leafs will get to the playoffs, and then you're right, yeah, they will. It won't matter what happens in the playoffs. So I don't know. I'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of teams, that's kind of that, you know, the regular season doesn't matter. It's the regular season, like you said, is the warm up for the playoffs. Although, granted, some teams may be struggling a little bit more than we thought. You look at the two wildcard teams in the West. You talked about the two wildcard teams in the East. The two wildcard teams in the West are Colorado and Vegas, two teams that I think pre-season a lot of people had as being the two best teams in the West. Maybe the two only good teams in the West. But it is still early in the season. They are in playoff spots right now, and I mean Colorado especially is trending upwards. Vegas has been going through, a lot of tough times. I mean, yeah, Jack Eichel is going to be joining them, but like, I don't think Jack Eichel is going to fix all the problems that they have, particularly because I think their problems have to do a lot with defense and goaltending, not necessarily putting the puck in the back of the net. But some interesting things going on the Western Conference side of things as well.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of upsets so far this year and a lot of like question marks around some teams, but Colorado and Vegas will probably make it in. I'm not too worried about them. I think that they'll be able to figure everything out by the time that it matters the most.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people kind of are saying the same thing. I don't think they're too worried. I just think 25 games into the season, maybe you start to get a little bit concerned, or maybe you start to get a little bit nervous. But like, hey, we got to start picking this up. But yeah, no, absolutely, I'd imagine that they would start to pick it up. The last thing I do want to mention, or actually, I guess two more things I want to mention, since we're talking about the Western Conference. Vancouver finally makes the right decision and fires everybody, and just when I think, hey, maybe they're taking a step in the right direction, Jim Rutherford's the guy who comes in. And like, I once again, love hate relationship with Jim Rutherford. Mainly love because he did give us the two Stanley Cups in Pittsburgh, and his trades had to do a lot to do with that. But he's also in his 70s now, and you talk about the whole old school versus new school. And since the Stanley Cups, I don't think he's really hit on much that he's done. And Vancouver is a team that historically, with management, just makes wrong decisions. And all of the things that the previous era of Vancouver has done was make bad trades, sign players in free agency to too much money, too long term, stupid no trade clauses. And these are things that Jim Rutherford has consistently been doing the last 3-4 years. So I mean, I was so glad for Vancouver, but I don't like who they have in place. Although, granted, he isn't their permanent GM. He's just their interim, and he's going to be working in hockey operations. So there is still time for Vancouver to save themselves, but I don't trust Vancouver to make a right decision, because when's the last time the Vancouver Canucks have made a right decision?
Well, they fired Travis Green. So maybe there is a right decision in hand. Who knows? I agree. I think that cleaning house was the right decision. It took them way too long to do that. But hey, they were able to do it though. So it's hard to say that they didn't make the right decision. They're 4-0 under Boudreau though. So
Yeah, they are. I mean, new coach effect. I imagine that's not going to last much longer. But I think Boudreau's a solid coach. I just, the Canucks roster is just not good. And ultimately, Boudreau's only going to be as successful as the team that gets put on the ice for him to coach. And there's got to be some really heavy improvement there. And I'm very interested to see who they hire as a permanent general manager going forward. I'm also really interested to see, how much roster control Jim Rutherford's given in the interim, because he mentioned in the press conference that he wasn't going to rush into any trades. But if there's anything I know about Jim Rutherford, is he loves rushing into trades. The first thing I would do is if I was a general manager, is I would call Jim Rutherford and see what is going on in Vancouver, and trying to get something done before they name a permanent general manager, because you got to get in while the opportunity's there.
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That's exactly what I was going to say. You got to get the opportunity when it's there.
And then the last thing I want to mention, just because, not to pump my own tires a little bit, but the Detroit Red Wings, I thought that they would be pretty good this year, and I predicted that Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider were going to have phenomenal rookie years, and that one of them was going to win the Calder Trophy. And, I don't want to sit here and say I'm right, but the Detroit Red Wings are 1 point out of a playoff spot. Lucas Raymond has 24 points. Moritz Seider as a defenseman has 19 points. I think if the Calder Trophy was to be awarded, both of them would be right up at the top for winning that award. And so I just want to say, I think that the Detroit Red Wings rebuild is finally, paying off. They got the Shanna plan going on over there. Or sorry, not the Shanna plan. They got Stevie Y. I'm confusing former Leafs guys. They got Stevie Y back in Detroit, controlling everything. And we know what he was able to do in Tampa. He built that Cup roster and then left before they won any of those Cups, which sucks for him on a personal level. But, those are Stevie Y's teams, and he's doing the same thing in Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit, although not going to make the playoffs, I don't think, they have been fun to watch. Like you said, the Raymond and Sidemen have been they've been so much fun to watch, and Detroit definitely has a bright future ahead of them, especially if they are able to develop these guys properly over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. I think it's too soon for them to be making the playoffs. They are a point out of the playoffs, but they also have a negative 18 goal differential in 28 games. So, they're not there yet. But, like you said, it's great to see they're playing some fun hockey, and they're having some success with it. They're a 500 hockey team, which, if you look at the record the Detroit Red Wings have been pumping out the last couple of years, I think everyone in Hockey Town is excited to see the Detroit Red Wings climbing up. And, it's always good to see the Detroit Red Wings, a historical franchise, a really good franchise in the NHL. It's good to see them have a little bit more success, and it'll be good to see them back in the playoffs in the near future.
Yeah, well, that'll mean a tougher Atlantic division, so I'm hoping that doesn't happen anytime soon, because that means more competition for Toronto. So.
Yeah, definitely. But, hey, the Red Wings are on the come up. The Habs are going down, and this is what always happens. Teams get better, teams get worse, and at least the good thing about the Atlantic Division is the Ottawa Senators are there, and I don't think they'll ever figure it out again. At least the way things are going over there, or I guess I'm here in Ottawa now, so over here, I guess. Although obviously not going to become a Senators fan anytime soon.
Buddy, gotta go to a game now.
Yeah, they play the Penguins on December 31st, so I might be there.
Oh yeah, you'll be there. The tickets are dirt cheap, I've heard.
Yeah, I was looking. You can get tickets for like $35, which, coming from Toronto, where you have to sell a literal kidney to get Leafs tickets, Not
It,
complaining.
a kidney and a leg. Come on, man. Don't underball Toronto like that.
Yeah, and with that, I think we'll just wrap up today by taking a look at some NFL storylines and kind of what's going on there. And I guess, well, my main question is, what's going on with the Buffalo Bills there, Jacob?
They're not in the playoff spot right now. Um, Believe it or not, this team that was supposed to run away with this is currently sitting out of a playoff spot. So I got a problem there. The reason why they're not doing so well, in my opinion, is their quarterback, Josh Allen. I think that although he's had a lot of bright spots over the past few years, we talk about this all the time. Once you get figured out, all it takes is people to adapt, and that's it. So I think that's what happened. I think teams are finally figuring him out, and defenses are. And if you want to talk about quarterbacks, Mac Jones has been ridiculous this year. He has been the best quarterback in this Eastern Conference, in like at least rookie wise. No one's coming close to him. He's gonna win Rookie of the Year. He's been unbelievable. He's brought the Patriots back to relevance, man. The Patriots, who lost Tom Brady, were expected to be nothing for so long, and look where they are now. So it comes down to quarterbacks, and ships are led by captains. And Josh Allen, when he's not working, the rest of the ship doesn't seem to work. So I think they will get it together and make the playoffs. It's so frustrating. They're in a wild card spot right now, but it's so frustrating seeing this team that was doing so well. They're doing so well, and then and then they play like this season, almost subpar. It sucks to see. It really sucks to see.
Yeah, so as it stands, the Buffalo Bills are in the last wild card spot. But I mean, in both the AFC and the NFC for different reasons, but the AFC in particular is just ridiculously tight. You have the Patriots, Titans, and Chiefs all at 9-4. Although, as things stand with tiebreakers right now, somehow the New England Patriots are the number one seed in the AFC because they fucking always find a way to be good. But then you have the Ravens and Chargers at 8-5. The Ravens don't look like an 8-5 team, and Lamar Jackson now has a potential injury which might completely change things. The Chargers, who always find a way to fuck things up, aren't fucking things up for once in their lives. And then the Colts have found a way to be 7-6 quietly under the Bills are 7-6, the Browns are 7-6, the Bengals are 7-6, and the Broncos are 7-6. And all of those teams, the Colts and the Bills are the two teams holding down the wild card spots at 7-6. But you have three teams outside of the playoffs on tiebreaker with the same record. And then you have the Steelers at 6-1 because they couldn't beat the Lions in overtime instead of also being 7-6. And then the Raiders and Dolphins are both 6-7. I would count the Raiders out because they're struggling, but the Dolphins have won 5 games in a row. And I mean, at this point, who knows? So I genuinely have no idea what's going on in this division. And I have no idea how this division is going to play out. Or sorry, not division, conference.
I don't know, man. There's a lot of question marks around this division, especially with teams like Buffalo playing so poorly, teams that would expect it to win. So you're right. I have no idea. I really don't know what's gonna happen, and I honestly think it's gonna be one of the most entertaining final stretches of this NFL season for sure in a long time.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be division races and wild card playoff spots up for grabs on the final day of the season, guaranteed. Yeah, it's gonna be very interesting. I mean, the AFC North in particular is insane because the Ravens are 8-5, the Browns and the Bengals are just one game back, and the Steelers are a game and a half back because they're 6-1. Any one of those teams could still win the division, let alone, make the playoffs, let alone or miss the playoffs. So it's absolutely crazy, just how close everything is in the AFC. And I mean, like you said, that's going to lead to some very entertaining football down the stretch. It's also going to lead to some very interesting playoffs. Meanwhile, the NFC is a lot more top heavy, but that means that at the bottom end, there's still crazy fights for playoff spots. I mean, the Cardinals are first place still at 10-2. The Packers are 10-3. The Bucks are 10-3. And I think, the Cardinals, a lot of people were surprised about, but now kind of everyone gets that they're having a really good season. The Packers and Bucks everyone thought would be good. The Cowboys look like they finally figured it out and are having a really good year at 9-4. The Rams have been struggling recently, but they're still a pretty good team. And then outside of those first 5 teams, which you think are all probably safe locks to make the playoffs, it's wide open after that, because you have the Niners at 7-6, then you have Washington at 6-7, Minnesota, Philadelphia, the Atlanta Falcons, the Saints, all at 6-7. And all I'll say is, it's bad when the 4-9 New York Giants are still in the playoff hunt. I mean, they're not. It means that they just haven't been mathematically eliminated yet, and they probably will be next week when they lose again. But, it's like you have teams below 500 in a playoff spot right now in the 6-7 Washington football team.
I mean, a below 500 team won that division with the Cowboys and the Washington football team last season. It's sad. It is sad, and I'm not gonna lie to you about it. It sucks to watch that a team below 500 could make the playoffs. Again, I don't know. There's so many possibilities. I love seeing how everything is wide open. I love it. I just it's so stressful for teams, and there's a lot of teams here that should be doing better. The Rams should be doing better, like you said, and there's a lot of other teams that should be doing better too, and they're not. And other teams, everyone's taking advantage of what they got, and that's ultimately what it comes down to: is teams that aren't doing the best, they're losing out. So what we need to do is we need to be able to take an opportunity and make the best of it. So that's what teams are doing. So ultimately, like you said, Giants are technically still not out. The Jets are the only team, and the Jaguars that have been mathematically eliminated. So still up for grabs, Lab. Like, it's still possible.
Yeah, I mean, hey, the Detroit Lions won a football game, so anything is possible. Yeah, shout out to Jared Goff for finally winning a game. Yeah, no, it's crazy. Like the season literally changes every single week depending on what happens. You have teams that are going into the week, the first seed in the division, first seed in the conference, and they come out and they're now like a bubble playoff team. So it's literally drastically changing week to week, and it's it just makes every Sunday that much more interesting, which ultimately you do want to see. And so I guess the way to wrap up tonight, or the way to wrap up talking about football, I guess, is looking at Monday Night Football. Speaking of the Rams Cardinals in Monday Night Football, that's a big game for both teams, because I feel like that might be a statement win for the Rams if they can win the game and kind of get back to showing that they're a talented team. Meanwhile, if the Cardinals win this game, they probably lock up the division.
I think that the Cards will win, but I don't expect it to be a very I expect a lot of touchdowns. Like, it's gonna be a throwing fest, and it's gonna be ridiculous. And I think that there's gonna be like a total of 10 touchdowns thrown in the game, which would be phenomenal, and it's great football to watch. I just think that the Cardinals are better, and winning that division would be a huge, huge positive for them going into the playoffs.
Absolutely, and I mean, obviously, there's just the one bye now for the 1 seed. The 2 seed doesn't get the bye anymore. It makes that number 1 seed all that more interesting. And I mean, you look at the craziness of both conferences. It would be a huge win, because Arizona's not just going for the division; they're also trying to win that number 1 seed, win the conference. And the Packers are going to be there, the Bucks are going to be there fighting for it. And so, yes, that would definitely be a huge win for the Cardinals, because it would keep them a game ahead of the Packers and the Bucks. If they were to lose, they would now be tied with those 3 teams. And then I believe, based on tiebreaker, I think the Packers would actually take the first seed if they were to lose tonight. But no, I agree with you. I mean, the Cardinals' defense has been a lot better than maybe anyone thought it was going to be. Especially given, Cliff Kingsbury coming from the Big 12, how offensively minded of a coach he is. And then obviously, Sean McVay loves his quarterbacks and loves his offense. I wouldn't be surprised if, your prediction comes true and it is a high-scoring game. What I will say, though, is, the Rams have been struggling, and that Cardinals defense has been a lot better than I think a lot of people have been expecting. So, I think the Rams are going to have to score points if they're going to want to win. It'll be interesting to see if they can do it.
Yep, I think that's a perfect way to sum it up, Lab. It's going to be a fun Monday Night Football tonight, so make sure you tune in and watch. It's going to be so much fun to watch.
Exactly. Speaking of fun, I think that's a great way to end it. And, it's been a little bit of a break in between episodes, and, it's fun to get back to recording, and it's great to see an episode getting able to come out. And, we'll try our best to keep it consistent weekly episodes from here on out, especially, with everything we got coming up. As, you mentioned the football season's coming to a great close to the regular season. Then, the playoffs will be right around the corner. And then, obviously we know what the Christmas season means. It means it's World Junior times. The rosters got announced today for Canada, but, we'll talk about the World Juniors maybe a little bit closer to Boxing Day. And then, the Olympics is also just around the corner. So it's an exciting time for sports, but then again, it always is, because there's always something going on in the world of sports. But any final thoughts, Jacob?
No, I think the World Junior Championship is going to be a fun one to talk about. There's a lot of talent on that team, and they look like one of the better teams of recent.
Yeah, definitely. And, a very special selection of 16-year-old Connor Bedard, which I'm sure we'll get into in a little while in future episodes. The last thing I do want to mention as well is congratulations to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on winning the Grey Cup. I know we don't really talk about the CFL much on this podcast, but, got to give the champions the credit they deserve, as they staged a pretty epic comeback. And I don't know if you saw that game-clinching interception in overtime, but what a way to win a championship.
Well, it was like tipped once, twice, and then the third time was caught. It was ridiculous. It was so much fun to watch. I won't even lie.
Yeah, so congratulations to Winnipeg, back-to-back Grey Cup champions. Of course, 2019 and 2021, with the 2020 season being canceled due to COVID. But with that, this has been another episode of the Benchwarmers Sports Talk Podcast. We want to thank you guys so much for listening after a little while between episodes. As always, we appreciate your support, and we'll see you very soon.